and welcome to The Front Page, the show that puts all of racing's biggest issues under the microscope. What a show we've got coming up today. We've got the news that ITV is poised to sign a new contract, but is racing's reliance on TV a long-term problem? Oisin Murphy is free to continue riding, but under which conditions? Meanwhile, the Irish gambling regulator compares betting to smoking, and no, I'm afraid that's not a joke. And William Buick brings up 2,000 wins, and the biggest ride in racing might be heading his way as well. For all of that, I am your host, Tom Kerr. I'm delighted to be joined in the studio by Maddie Playle. How are you, Maddie?
Yeah, very good, Tom. Enjoying the warm weather and looking forward to getting stuck into some meaty talking points.
Absolutely. And at home, nursing a sporting injury, Mr. Matt Rennie. How are you, Matt?
All good, all good. The remarkably warm weather up here in Yorkshire is making it a little bit more bearable with the injury. It was terrific to be at York at the weekend, where it was absolutely roasting, and I think that's putting it mildly in a way.
And for those wondering how you've managed to incur such an injury, tell the masses your sporting exploits.
Yeah, I was batting during cricket and I tried to hit a ball out the park, and the ball didn't go very far, and my shoulder almost nearly went as far as the ball in a way. So very embarrassing, but we'll be back in no time, and I'm sure it's nothing that no jockeys have faced before. It's a little injury compared to some of the things they go through.
Yeah, well, listen, following a long line of people to get slightly comical injuries in cricket over the years. I remember Andy Gorham, I think it was, missed one of the Euros or the World Cup, having sustained an injury playing for Scotland's cricket team, which was a bit of a punchline, I think, right there. Okay, we're going to move to the first story, which is ITV, and they're doing a new deal with racing, hopefully going to mean that ITV racing remains on TV through to 2030. Maddie, this news, which was broken by our very own Lee Mottershead on Saturday, it's obviously good news. Very few sports these days have free-to-air access.
Yeah.
So fantastic. I think everyone in racing is very grateful for what ITV does, and indeed, whether you're a fan or part of the sport, it's positive. But one thing I wanted to sort of pick up on today is just the fact about where TV audiences are going and what this might mean in the future. We did a bit of research around this, and just looking at the Grand National audience, which was in 2021 was 8.8 million, and this year was 5.2 million. If the trend continues, we'll put this up on the screen now. If the trend continues, the audience in 2030 would be just 1.8 million. That's the trend. So no guarantee that's going to happen. The fall may be shallower. But what's happening here isn't just a declining interest in horse racing. It's actually a universal problem for TV, where fewer people are watching broadcast TV as streaming, social media takes over. Is racing sort of sleepwalking in this one via an over-reliance on terrestrial TV to get the message out there?
I mean, of all the things racing is sleepwalking into, I think this is probably quite far down the list, if I'm honest, right now, purely because I don't think it's an exclusive problem to racing. You know, the way that we consume media is changing, and various sports have faced an array of challenges in terms of broadcasting rights and whether their product gets to be free to air or not. And I think we're in, as you say, an incredibly privileged position. You might not be, as a hardcore racing fan, ITV's #1 target audience, but it's impossible to deny that this is great news. And we have so much negativity to talk about, don't we, on this show? Week in, week out, more of which I'm sure will come in a few moments' time. But I think it's great that, ITV is supporting racing in this way. We've had new initiatives. They've been brave. They've covered the likes of the Sunday series, the Racing League. There was so much action on the channel last year, wasn't there? And they've been unafraid to adapt and change their broadcast accordingly. I think, yes, we should be thinking about what we're going to do to tackle this sort of modern problem of, I guess, the preference for streaming among younger people. But I also think that there are definitely ways that can be done. We saw recently how we've had the Championsville Gallop, which was brought out, and I think things like that are a step in the right direction in terms of getting people to consume racing in a different way, perhaps introducing racing to people for the first time. And yeah, I think this is generally a very, very positive story, and I'm looking forward to 5 more years of ITV coverage.
Yeah, absolutely. The share of viewing for 16 to 34-year-olds that's done on linear TV, broadcast TV, is just 13%, against almost half of all consumption for all age groups combined. And you can imagine that scales with the age groups. And that number, 1.8 million, though, is, that's kind of sobering, isn't it? I mean, imagine if we get to 2030 and 1.8 million people are watching the Grand National. Where does that leave racing?
A dangerous place, without a doubt. But I think it will just be a case of moving with the times, and perhaps there's another way which we can engage people and get people to watch racing. I do think, like I say, this is across all TV, and I don't think it's an issue that's just for racing. The way in which we watch now is so different, and when we have shows, films, whatever, at our fingertips within the click of a button, and we can be dictated to by when we want to watch things. We're spoilt for choice, and we live very busy lives, Tom. So I think it's just a cultural sort of change in the way that we engage with sport. It is a concern, of course it is, but I think there'll be natural consequences of it, and we need to figure out what those are.
One of the details in Lee's story was that the sport had rejected ITV's idea of a festive festival, which would basically involve distilling Kempton's 2-day meeting into a single afternoon, moving Ascot's Christmas Saturday fixture so it falls after Christmas, and moving the Welsh National as well. So a few adjustments basically designed to give this really joined up post-Christmas festival of top-class action. This is already probably the second best period of the jump season, certainly in terms of sustained audience interest. But the sport rejected it. Quelle surprise. Someone comes up with an idea for change, and the sport goes, nah.
Yeah. I mean, we're having a lot more of that sort of festivalisation of events in racing, and I think they're not all positive. I do think when you look at the broader fixture list and the knock-on impacts it would have, it's not all positive, but I do think it would be an incredibly easy sell, and it would be easy to get momentum behind it, would give more of a structure to the season, like we see in Ireland with the Dublin Racing Festival. I'm not surprised, having been in racing and seen the ideas that they vetoed over the last couple of years, and when you've got all these different parties pulling in different directions, acting in their own self-interest, there is just going to be this paralysis, and until the structure of the way racing's run changes, I don't think we'll see much significant change.
Matt, ITV bosses must be sort of tearing out their hair to some degree. Simultaneously they're backing the sport, and yet when they're bringing forward ideas which I think any neutral observer would agree make a lot of sense, they're getting knocked back. Alongside that, they're obviously keen to see the presentation of the sport, the structure of the sport evolve to make it as engaging as possible for viewers at home. Things that have been talked about over the years about sort of mic'd up jockeys. Our very own Alan Sweetman last week talking about the sport needing to be more open to talking about defeat as well as success. How do you see it? What needs to change in racing to make its coverage, its TV coverage or broadcast coverage generally, as engaging as possible?
Yeah, well, I do think just very briefly on the point before, and it does link to this one. I think the sport's dropped a massive ball by not doing this Christmas spectacular in a way, because it would such enhance the coverage that, as a sportsman who likes many sports, if we packed a festival like that at the Christmas time, I think you'd attract more viewers coming off from people who are in football, whatnot. This year we're going to have the Boxing Day fixtures, the fixtures on the 27th, 28th in the Premier League Championship, whatnot. We're going to have an Ashes test down under as well. If you linked a blockbuster racing festival into that time, which, given the time of the year it is, and when racing takes place at that time far earlier in the afternoon, wouldn't actually clash with most of the football matches, let's say, and the test match in cricket's going to be in late in the night anyway. You could stock a really good sports person's day by having it in there. In terms of enhancing coverage, I think the beaten horses coverage it does that one piques my interest, especially, you know, in Australia when they do the jockeys interviews coming back into the weighing room. They're really insightful and informative, and we have had that to some degree here. I obviously remember when Nicky Henderson and Nico de Boer had that awful Cheltenham Festival last year, and there was that little bit of frost and edge when Matt Chapman asked for a beaten comment on Nico when I think he pulled up in what was the Ballymore novices hurdle at the time. Um, that's the sort of sound bites we need on not only on broadcast coverage but for the social coverage, which then could help work in a sort of an evolving relationship to get those people tuning into the broadcast. Because of that, we do need. I think what the sport severely lacks at the moment is, you know, we are trying to fill that void of what Frankie Dettori left, because he had that resonance with not just the racing people, but the sports community as a whole. We don't really have that in racing at the moment, and we do need someone from the very top to put their hands up and be that colourful character. You know, say wearing mics in races, going on, you know, sports quiz shows and whatnot. And from there, I think it would only benefit. You know, racing's got a rare golden opportunity here with ITV Racing. We're in such a luxurious position to have a terrestrial broadcaster do a real long-term commitment in a way. You know, they're still struggling to work out who's going to be showing the Ashes in Australia this year, and that's cricket in one of the biggest sports in the world. We have a real open goal here to really kick on and thrive with our TV coverage, and I just feel like racing's traditional hostilities change is going to hold it back already, and I really don't want it to.
Maddie, what's your view? What would enhance the presentation of horse racing, whether it's on ITV or TikTok or anywhere?
Maybe just prioritising people who aren't afraid to go against the grain. Maybe people who don't have links to racing. You know, they're not going to offend anyone if they say something. They don't have as many vested interests as some of the people we see on TV. And that's nothing against them. You know, we all speak from our own personal perspectives. But I sometimes think it's lacking a bit of that edge and a bit of that energy. And I think sometimes there's a reliance to employ former jockeys in punditing roles, and not saying that they're not successful. You know, you look at what Ruby Walsh does and he's tremendously good. His analysis is one of my favourite segments of ITV's coverage. I just kind of want to see someone set the cat among the pigeons a little bit. Also, something that I discussed actually with John Hunt a couple of years ago, he approached me sort of slightly concerned, but also wanting to try and find a woman to commentate more regularly on racing. And there hasn't really been anyone emerge since. We've seen Gina Bryce obviously was involved in Five Live's Grand National coverage, and she commented on the Grand National, and that's fantastic. But I'd love to see a woman give commentating a go, and just have someone in that more prominent role. Why not? You know, other sports are arguably much more progressive in that way.
Gina got a few brickbats thrown her way.
Unsurprisingly.
Unsurprisingly, indeed, yes. What can we learn from what other sports are doing, Maddie, in terms of how they're presenting the sport, how they're broadcasting it, how they're engaging people?
I think just try things. Just don't be afraid to try things. I'm a big watcher of Formula One, and I admire what they've done in terms of selling the narrative of the personalities of the people involved, you know, whether that's the drivers, the team principals. I think I would like to get to know racing's players on a more casual level. You know, who are these people? And how can we connect to them better? What do they do when they get spare time? You know, just something that makes them more touchable, I guess, to the wider public, rather than these sort of mythical figures. I think just make it all a bit more fun and approachable. And there are many different ways to do that.
Indeed, yeah. We're going to go on to our next topic, but just before we do that, we need you to fill out our major customer survey. This survey is looking at all aspects of the Racing Post products and content portfolio. We want to know what you think about it so that we can serve you to the best of our ability. There are £500 Amazon vouchers up for grabs as a thank you for taking the 10 to 15 minutes it takes to fill out the survey. The link to the survey will be in the description of this, and we will be enormously grateful if you could spare a few minutes of your time to tell us what you think about our coverage. We'll move on now to our second story, and this is the latest in the Oisin Murphy saga. He can continue to ride after his drink driving conviction. However, the BHA said over the weekend that he will do so with extremely strict conditions on his licence. In an update issued over the weekend, the BHA said the conditions must be adhered to at all times and included detailed and strict procedures relating to further enhanced testing both on and off the racecourse. However, they said that the precise terms are private and confidential. Maddie, should he be riding? There's a wide view here. Some people think that he's been punished. There's a human at the heart of this. Others think, given the gravity of the offence, he has been let off lightly.
With him in mind and what's best for him, I'm concerned, and I would say no, he shouldn't be. His actions that he's been, he's now pled guilty to them, were incredibly reckless and dangerous. And I worry that these conditions on his licence, whatever they are, arguably they should be more, I would like to see more transparency there, because they weren't affected before. He had conditions on his licence before for previous transgressions, and they clearly didn't stop or aid him into getting the help that he needed. I am concerned when you look at the way other cases have been dealt with by the BHA that this isn't really enough. I was looking at various cases just before we came in here, and obviously each case needs to be treated individually, but if you look at the likes of Marco Gianni, who served a 6-month ban for testing positive for cocaine, and then you look at Oisin, who tested 66 micrograms per 100 units of alcohol at 7 a.m, and that's a long time after the event has taken place, also involving refusing to take a sample. I just think we as a sport and as the media, it would be great, like Andrew Boulding said recently, to have confidence that we can have trust that Oisin is getting the help that he needs. But I wonder if this is it, and it's hard to be confident in that when you don't know what these stipulations to his licence are. I don't think it reflects very well on the sport at all, or the BHA, in terms of how they deal with these cases, that he has been able to continue riding throughout this whole saga. I think it paints a very poor picture.
Brant Dunshea basically confirmed that the prior conditions on Murphy's licence did not enable the regulator to take a stronger position this time around, certainly not on the basis of those conditions anyways. One would assume that the new conditions will, and that therefore Murphy is now likely in the last chance saloon.
I mean, is that not a little bit late, given the severity of what he did and the potential risk not only to himself but to others around him? You're talking about a professional athlete who, that's the thing for me. Not only is he, I'm concerned about him as a person, as an individual. He's not just putting himself at risk. He's putting, other participants in racing, other jockeys. He's putting everyone else at risk, and I just don't think that flies with me. It's almost too little, too late.
What do you think of the sport's response to the conviction?
In terms of
how people within the sport have responded to it?
I think it's a joke, to be honest. I think it's an absolute joke. Addiction is a horrible thing, and everyone deserves the support that they need. We all make mistakes, but I worry that, there was commentary on Look on Sunday a few weeks ago whereby one member of the panel said that, or sometimes the demons win, and they do, and we all have demons, but those demons don't result in, you know, the potential death of other people. And I think to downplay that danger is, you know, I just find it unspeakable, and I worry. I worry for Oisin, I worry for those closest to him. This is, you know, he's had ongoing issues, and it's just a very unsavoury thing. I think racing needs to do more to support its workforce, definitely. We've seen that. But equally, I don't really have trust in the BHA currently that they're being proactive enough to do that.
Matt, Murphy gives a lot to the sport. He's one of the best known individuals in the weighing room. Clearly he's a popular and successful individual. Do you think that influences how people see this?
I think it makes it more, people either go to one extreme side or the other in terms of their view on what should happen to Oisin. And in this instance, I found myself bouncing from either side to side in trying to find out how I actually feel about it. And I think Maddie made some very, very good points in there that, you know, addiction is a disease, you know, and we have to give people help as much as we can. But Oisin's been given plenty. And what I find almost sort of a bit sad is we can't really use him as a poster boy for the sport anymore because of what he's done, and rightly so, we cannot do so. But he would have been that one of what we previously talked about, who could have filled the void left by Frankie Dettori. Look, in any other areas of employment, if you had done what Oisin did, your employer would have been in their rights to suspend you, even sack you. It's a bit more clouded in racing, given the owners basically with Qatar Racing retainer that he's got. You know, the BHA do license him, but they're not. You wouldn't say they're exactly the same as someone being employed by who works in the tax company or something like that. However, given they do license Oisin Murphy, they should have all the power, any concerns, to take it away whenever they feel a concern is necessary. I think taking it away for the summer or 6 months and saying to him, you need to prove to us you are sober, essentially, would have been the way forward. When even if he's not turned up to the races, then I think he still should have been tested at least every day by someone from the BHA to ensure that he's sober, because it's such a sad case, that it was a sad time we've had to actually come this far, essentially, to the extent where, yes, there's some empathy that he does have some demons and whatnot, but in the best interests of the sport, we have to be stern. And I think I agree with Maddie. He shouldn't be riding at the moment, at least.
Also,
at the very least, he shouldn't have been riding after. We didn't know it was him that was charged, but obviously there was the murmurs that it was. He should have taken a step back then, and he should have taken a step back after he was charged at Royal Ascot as well, because it doesn't paint racing in a great look at all, especially in today's era where every jockey should be treated like an athlete and an elite sports athlete like any other sport as well.
I think also, as I say, Tom, different cases are different in their nature. But you look at someone like Charlie Deutsch, who was jailed for 10 months after a drink driving offence, and there was a police chase that ensued. But again, the levels that he was testing were far lower than that of Oisin Murphy, and those levels that we have from Oisin were a significant amount of time after the crash itself. That hasn't stopped Charlie becoming a great ambassador for racing, a wonderful jockey, enjoying a brilliant career. But I'm sure if you asked him, you know, what did you learn from those 10 months that you were in custody? I'm not saying, you know, you can't compare cases like for like, but it seems disproportionate.
Yeah, well, it's clearly a case that brings strong opinions to the fore. I think everyone can unite, though, in the hope that Oisin Murphy puts this episode firmly behind him and goes on to enjoy a blemish-free career in the sport. Let's talk now about racing's relationship, slightly strange and strained relationship with the thing that pays the bills, which is betting. Matt, I want to start with the comments of the Chief Executive of the Irish Gambling regulator, Anne-Marie Caulfield. Her organisation, which is new, it's been set up in the wake of some gambling regulation reforms in Ireland. It's going to be bringing about a ban on pre-watershed advertising for betting, which is going to have a huge impact on the racing channels. And she gave an interview to the Racing Post last week in which she made the comparison between gambling advertising around racing and smoking advertising around snooker, essentially saying to the sport, well, snooker got over it, you should too. How alarming is it that comparison is being freely made between betting and smoking?
Yeah, I thought it was a great piece from Connor, essentially to get as much as he did out of it. But in terms of in terms of the comparisons on a lesser scale laughable, well, a lesser scale naive, I think they were incredibly laughable to be brutally honest with you, and I thought it was an incredibly loose connection. The thing snooker has, which racing doesn't, is snooker has a massive outreach in China, a mass, one of the biggest populations in the world. Racing doesn't have that, and I don't know, it's hard. But I was actually quite angry reading the comparison in a way. Betting is always, he said, it's intrinsically linked with racing, and it's also participatory. You don't have to go to the races and you don't have to go to have a bet. However, every time I go to the races with my friends who aren't in the racing circles, the most thing they are looking forward to doing at the sport is having a bet. And we should never try and shake that off or demonize it, but make sure we present it in a well constructed, careful way. I have great sympathy again with people with addictions, and gambling addictions is one of them. But you simply cannot just demonize betting as the sport seems to be wanting to do all the time, when it is, I would argue, the most integral pastime of being at the races. People want to go to racing and feel the excitement and the enjoyment walking down to the track thinking they might win a bit of money today, whether that be from a £2.50 each way bet or a £10 or a £20 bet, if they can afford it. It's just, I thought it was so loose and naive and pretty shocking connection, really.
Yeah.
Especially in, racing's facing so many headwinds. We're gonna have a triple whammy coming up with the racing tax, affordability checks still going on, and levy reform, which the sport's in complete deadlock about. But I just find it totally ironic as well that we've got the racing tax. I'm sure we'll cover it in a bit, and these gambling regulations where they want to stop people putting money into the sport through gambling. They're going to take more money out of the sport through gambling. It doesn't weigh up, and it's just absolutely ludicrous.
Well, yeah, let's stick with the Irish gambling regulator for the minute. We'll turn to what's going on in Britain in a second, Maddie. Let's just dig into this comparison between smoking and betting, because this is something which I think racing and those who bet are in real danger of losing control of the narrative around this, because there's two things that I think are absolutely crucial to state here. The first is, nobody goes to the snooker and goes, I need to spark up a Marlboro Light in order to play or watch this. It's secondary. It's might be part of the culture, but it's not a embedded, intrinsic part of the sport. Betting on racing is. It absolutely is. For the vast majority of people who engage the sport, they do so through the medium of betting. It is an intrinsic part of the sport. So first of all, comparing the two.
Well, we'll put it this way, right? If you don't have cigarettes, you'll still have snooker.
Yeah.
If you don't have betting, you won't have racing.
In a nutshell, exactly. But the other thing, and I think this is really crucial, is there is no level of smoking that is safe.
No.
A single cigarette is still harmful to you. That is not the case for betting. Some people bet too much, or they don't have control of their betting, or they bet in a manner which causes them or their loved ones harm. That is undeniable. It is a reality. However, the vast majority of people do not have any negative repercussions from betting. And in fact, most people have quite a positive relationship. They do it for fun, for entertainment, for the intellectual challenge. So the comparison between smoking and betting falls down at the first hurdle. But you've got people in positions of real power now parroting it
Yeah.
as if it's an accepted fact. That's really
I
worrying.
think it's just incredibly ignorant and naive, to be honest, and shows just a total lack of understanding of the relationship between racing and betting. And I think that's almost all that needs to be said, to be honest. But as you say, those words coming from someone in that position are incredibly worrying. The impending issues that there's going to be with television coverage concerns me greatly. In terms of betting in Ireland, and that was just tone deaf.
I don't know if racing does enough to defend betting. I'm always cautious of criticising people in another country, and you know, Ireland's got its own political culture, which I'm not tapped into in the same
And
way.
if anything, Ireland has a closer, you know, governmental relationship with racing.
It seems to me that the sport in Ireland has, to a degree, at least publicly, sort of rolled over and allowed its tummy to be tickled on this, and not really put up any fight. But then, more generally, does racing actually defend the engagement of its customers for betting? I was looking at the Going is Good ads by Great British Racing, and I haven't seen them all. I don't know where they all are, but I've only seen the ones that they've sort of put out.
Funnily enough, when it was all spent on distribution, wasn't it?
Well, maybe I'm not the target audience though. But there's no mention of betting in it. You know, I'm not saying they don't mention betting at all, but I haven't seen any ads that mention betting. It's sort of alluded to in the excitement of it. But
I think culturally it's becoming, people are seeing it as a dirty word, aren't they? And they're seeing it as a dirty association. And you're probably right. I think we should do more to actively dissuade from that viewpoint. I think one of the main issues racing face is, at the moment, is that it is being, and more on this in a minute, but it is being conflated with casino games and different types of gaming, when in actual fact, you know, you only have to be a racing fan and understand the mental work and commitment, and it's a skill, isn't it? It's a skill that we all hone throughout our racing, our love of racing and its tenure. Now, I'm not saying everyone bets, nor should bet. You don't have to enjoy the sport. But yeah, I think that's the main thing, is that the language surrounding betting and the cultural connection that the public have with betting is changed. And perhaps we need to do more to communicate the reality.
Well, I agree with you, and a lot of that, Maddie. But one thing that actually troubles me is that this idea that betting's only okay if you've put loads of effort and thought into it.
Well, it's
because
not.
actually,
No.
people go racing and they go to the paddock and they bet on the one with the shiniest coat or the nicest name, and that's fine as well.
Of course it is. Of course it is. And you know, it's the same. We talk about affordability checks. You know, you can go out and spend money, and that's your right,
Totally.
within safe, responsible limits. But there are plenty of other situations where you can spend a hell of a lot of money and not be held to such standards.
No.
So it is that sort of paradoxical.
I'd like to see how much thought process has gone into the average supercar purchase, for example. Or anyways, let's touch on very quickly the AXA racing tax, which is the British Racing's campaign to get the government to think again around proposals to harmonise rates of tax. I'm actually going to say well done to the BHA, well done to the sport, because for once it feels like the sport is sort of coming together and standing up for its funding model and its right to exist. There's been good momentum around it. I think people are getting behind it. They're really clearly stating the distinction between a type of betting which sustains an industry and a type of betting, casino betting, which ultimately has very low overheads, and the need for the taxation treatment to distinguish between the two.
You've just said it, Tom. Exactly that. And I would agree with the general sort of feeling of positivity, I guess, that racing has been proactive in the way that it's tackled this. And Brendan, she spoke yesterday and sort of said to encourage people to be noisy. And I'm hearing a lot about noise already, and that's promising.
Yes, it is. It is. We will put in the description of this video a link to the website where you can send a letter to your MP. It takes literally a couple of minutes, and the more people that voice their concern, the more likely that this hike to betting on racing taxes will be seen off. Got one more segment to go. Just before that, though, a little bit about our subscription offering with Racing Post Plus. Okay, yeah, more details about Racing Post Plus in the description. But we turn now to our final story this week, and that's an old-fashioned power ranking. Who is making waves in British racing? Well, we had the July meeting at Newmarket, and what a meeting it was for William Buick. He was bashing in the winners, but most importantly, he brought up his 2000s winner as well, a huge landmark for one of the top jockeys in British racing. And his employer, Maddie, Godolphin, are motoring along with pretty startling results. I was looking at their prize money haul, 4.5 million this year in Britain. That's already more than they achieved in the last 2 years. And they could be on course, they look on course indeed, for a very, very strong total. What does that say about their momentum in 2025?
Well, it's certainly in a better place than it was a couple of years ago, where we were having conversations about, what is the future of Godolphin going to look like? Charlie Appleby is not regularly threatening in Group 1s. He had the whole stable stateside, and that's where he was prioritising much of his firepower. Saeed bin Sarour's numbers were dwindling. Charlie himself couldn't buy a winner at Royal Ascot until Rebels Romance won the Hardwicke, of course. And they've won, the last 2 runnings of the 2000 Guineas as well. So things seem to be going in the right direction, but I do think it could be, when you're comparing them to the likes of Coolmore, I think their dominance is so well established that we still need more evidence that the Godolphin's firmly on a trajectory if we're looking, say, 5-10 years into the future. But they've certainly got the firepower in the breeding sheds as well, the likes of Knight of Thunder. He's doing very well. He's sort of their response, isn't he, to the Coolmore battalions. But yes, I think they still would probably like a bit more depth among their older horses, their sprinters as well. I mean, they had, was it 3 in the July Cup on Saturday? Notable speech. It didn't quite go to plan, did it? But that's an area which Britain's struggling more generally.
We'll come to that in a second.
Yes.
But on the on the sort of superpower front, it's a fascinating one. As you say, Godolphin's season actually looks strong on paper, but sort of masking a bit of an up and down time in some respects, and certainly Charlie Appleby at Royal Ascot, as you say. What's interesting, I think, this year is that it's really sort of sprung into life, that sort of ownership picture where you have not just Godolphin going quite strongly, Coolmore as usual with their prolific success, but also huge investment by Wathnan, and then upstarts like Ammo coming onto the scene as well, spending big money, yet to maybe see the results for themselves this year. I guess the question is, can these new organisations become long-term rivals to the giants of Godolphin and Coolmore, who dominated the sport for so many years?
Yeah, I think if we're talking long-term, then it has to go back to the breeding. I know there's been murmurs from both Wathnan and Ammo that they're going to start, collecting broodmares, which is positive in that regard. But you look at Ammo Racing and Kia Drabshan sort of touched upon that they need power.
Birthday today, Kia's birthday today, by the way.
Is it?
Yeah,
in
happy
the paper.
Birthday, Kia.
Yeah, happy birthday to Kia. So yeah, they need more power at that level, and they are acknowledging that it's a long-term project. Gone are the times of, for Ammo anyway, buying all the best horses at the breeze-ups, because I don't think that's quite sustainable. Wathnan have a slightly different approach in terms of they're purchasing a lot of horses, yes, the breeze-ups, but also in training. So those horses have already reached a certain level, but before they get to them, and credit must go to the likes of Richard Brown and Ollie Tate for their buying strategy is absolutely remarkable. They don't seem to get many of these wrong, And they're ultimately
are having a
Yeah.
great year.
Yeah.
And some of those big buys really paying off.
Yeah. But that's the weight of money that they're playing with, and you need that. But I also think you need bloodstock.
But it's as a measure of how hard it is, look at Ammo this year. So Ammo currently sitting 16th in the owner standings.
Yes.
No big race wins this year. Ghostwriter's withdrawal in Newmarket.
Disaster.
A pure, fluke, freak event. But the latest slice of bad luck. I mean, to give an idea of just how tough this game is, they're 16th and they're sitting behind a couple of ownership vehicles who had one solitary Group 1 winner at Royal Ascot, and with that one winner are now ahead of them.
But that's the way that the sport works, and I think Keir has acknowledged that. I mean, I spoke to him after he had various placings at Royal Ascot, and you could tell that the sportsman in him was kind of frustrated, but equally he understood that that's the sport that he was in, and also it so easily could go the other way. These are fine margins in sport, and as I say, they've committed to a longer term plan, so I think that's just a pill they've got to swallow for now.
Absolutely.
It'll be in the next year whether that change in attitudes begins to bear fruit.
Yeah. Matt, other than Buick's 2000, I guess the big story from the July meeting was Richard Hughes getting his first Group 1 as a trainer with no half measures in the July Cup, tipped up at 50-1 by our very own Robbie Wilders, the anti-postman. A tremendous effort by both trainer and tipster there. That was a fantastic success for Richard Hughes. First of all, a word on what he's achieved as a trainer.
Oh, absolutely fantastic. I mean, he's in an elite bracket now, which only a very few people can have the right to boast about. And to be fair to Richard, he's almost done it the hard way. He's built up over time, and he talked about to us about how he feels he places his horse incredibly well. And I have to say, I echo that over the last sort of 3 or 4 years. Everything's been on an upward curve, and people have recognised that now. He's a fantastic placing trainer, and I think now that he's got the one Group 1 under his belt, I think there'll be a few more bigger owners going into his yard. Given the talents we saw at the saddle, he's now taken out of the saddle and into his training career. It's brilliant, and it's one of the good stories that racing absolutely needs. Obviously,
there's a really good chart we'll flash up on the screen now actually as well, showing his prize money since 2020. He started training a few years before that, but since 2020, every single year he has improved his prize money and done that without a massive expansion of his string, and to be honest, without any sort of huge flag bearers for the yard. It's a real sign of a trainer sort of slowly but patiently building up an operation and what they're achieving.
Exactly that. It shows that he's got the gift, and now hopefully so he will be rewarded with a few bigger owners going into the yard. Obviously, as well on York at Friday, he had a really good filly win the Summer Stakes in Saidia Darian. Hopefully I pronounced it correctly, who could be even better than no half measures. But it's fantastic. And also it's worth mentioning that when Neil Callan and Richard Hughes do team up, they're a team that strike, because I remember a few years ago being at Northumberland Plate Day, and they won the big one with calling the wind, I think it is, or along those lines. So
well, there we go. That's one to note there. One to note, and definitely Robbie Wilder's one to note. Maddie, you've talked about this. You've written about this recently, though, because you're sort of concerned that British racing's in a funk.
A little bit with the
sprinting. Sorry, that is a Freudian slip right there. British racing, potentially also in a funk, but it's sprinting.
Yes, indeed. I mean, you only have to look at recent results and future markets to see that. American Affair was a handicapper, a very good one. He's won a Group 1 at Royal Ascot. Flora of Bermuda was third in the other big sprint at Royal Ascot, behind the best from France and the best from Japan in Lazat and Satono Rev. You look at the future markets, I mean, an Irish 2-year-old is favourite for the Nunthorpe, which is quite incredible. Goodwood, you go ahead to the King George Stakes, and Asphora, the Australian mare, is favourite for that. There isn't as we've seen with no half measures, there isn't a big jump between the lower classes, I guess, is the best way to put it. And that's no disrespect to horses like her and American Affair. It's power to them, really. But I'm just concerned where are these horses coming from? You know, when a race like the Commonwealth Cup is performing quite poorly, that it's at risk of being downgraded. You know, they've tried, the Flat Pattern Committee have tried to implement some changes with the Windsor Castle. They haven't been very positively received. And there's, of course, this modern trend of horses going to stud very early, sometimes at the end of their 2-year-old careers. And we need those top-class sprinters to hang around, but we also need to be producing them in the first place. And at the moment, we don't have much evidence of that.
Last point today is the most exciting horse in training, Field of Gold. It's been confirmed that Colin Keane will miss a ride at Goodwood in the Sussex because of his whip ban. And the talk is that man of the moment, William Buick, could be in the hot seat for the ride. What do you reckon?
I think he, you know, from what John Gosden said, reading between the lines, he is the short price favourite, and that's understandable given his relationship with that yard goes back an awfully long way. Makes perfect sense, doesn't it?
Who would you put up?
I'd probably put up Buick here.
Yeah.
He just doesn't seem to make very many mistakes, does he? That's the tagline that comes out these days, but I do think it's true. Thought he gave some fantastic rides at the July course. He seems to really, I know it's his home track and it means a lot to him, but he really seems to up his game. And so do Godolphin. They've got an exceptional record at that track. But on younger horses, inexperienced horses, he's always in the right place. And I think he caught Ryan Moore napping a few times last week.
Yeah. Matt, John Gosden joked that he'd received a photograph from someone in Saratoga, the spectre of Frankie Dettori continues to loom over British racing. But who would you have in the saddle for Field of Gold?
Yeah, no, it's probably wise we don't bring Lanfranco over to ride. I don't think we could all hack the return after the retirement, inverted commas. I think William Buick is the most sensible one, but I think anyone could really ride Field of Gold. You know, he's such an uncomplicated horse. It was a great shame what happened in the Guineas with him and Kieran, and ironically, Kieran's proven himself to be a really good rider last night at Longchamp as well. So
yeah,
when denying a certain Colin Keane and the Juddmonte horses in the Prix de Malloret.
It's never going to happen, of course, but
no,
I would love
not.
to see Kieran back on him, and just what a story that would be. Silence the doubters.
Well,
it's just not going to happen. But
that would be quite something. Sort of, but then imagine he lost.
It would be. It'd be William Buick or Tom Marcon for me. It was outside. I think Tom's a really good rider. Maybe not up to William Buick's elite level yet, but he will be there in time. So, and he's a great advocate for the sport as well. It'd be good to see him get a real superstar under his belt this year with economics currently sidelined as well.
Yeah, I don't think he's had access to obviously he's not had access to as many top class horses as the likes of William Buick. So I don't know if that's 100% fair, Matt, but I agree. Tom's right up there.
Yeah, he's a big talent. Well, we're going to have to leave it there. We have run out of time, but thank you so much to my panellists for joining me for this week's discussion, and thank you to you at home for tuning in. We'll be back with more coverage of all the big stories in racing at the same place, same time next week. Until then, goodbye.